Bought you hashed I read a dead woman's fortune. Then she came home. There is one rule in my line of work. Never take money from someone who is about to die. My grandfather taught me that when I was 12 years old, sitting behind his fortune-reading stall in the night market, watching people come and go under strings of red lanterns. He said the living could owe debts, the dead could not. So if a person walked up to our stall with death already sitting on their shoulder, we could read their fate, we could point them toward one last chance, but we could never take their money. That was the rule. I followed it for 7 years after my grandfather died. Until one rainy night, a man in a black suit placed a stack of wet cash on my table and asked me to read his wife's fortune. The problem was, his wife had already been dead for 21 days. My name is Wu Chen. At least, that is the name my grandfather gave me. I never knew my parents. According to him, they left me outside a mountain temple during a thunderstorm with nothing but a red string tied around my wrist and a birth chart folded inside my blanket. My grandfather was a fortune reader, but not the kind you see in busy shopping streets, smiling under neon signs, telling rich women they will find love if they buy the right crystal bracelet. He read death omens, birth charts, house shadows, the shape of a person's bones, the way smoke curled from incense, the way a candle flame bent when there was no wind. Most people thought he was just another old man with a wooden table, a cracked compass, and too many yellow papers in his sleeves. They were wrong. By the time I was 16, he had taught me enough to know when someone's luck had dried up, when a house had started feeding on its owner, and when the thing standing behind a customer was not their shadow. After he passed away, I inherited his stall. It was nothing special. A foldable wooden table, 2 stools, a black cloth, a brass compass, a bundle of red thread, a box of old coins, and a small wooden sign with 4 words carved into it. Fortunes read after sunset. Every evening, I set up near the old bridge where the night market began. Food vendors shouted from one side of the road, scooters passed like angry insects, and people came to me for the same reasons people had always come to fortune readers. Love, money, marriage, sickness, bad luck. Most of them did not really want truth. They wanted comfort wrapped in mystery. I was usually willing to give it to them, but sometimes someone sat down and before they even spoke, I could smell cold ash. That was death. Death has a smell. Not like a corpse. Not exactly. It smells like incense after rain. Like old paper, like a room that has been closed for too long. When I smelled that on someone, I never took payment, because my grandfather's voice always came back to me. The living do not take money from the dead. That night, rain fell so hard the streetlights blurred into yellow halos. The market was almost empty. Steam rose from the noodle stands. Plastic covers snapped in the wind. My black cloth was damp at the corners, and I was just about to pack up when a black car stopped beside the bridge. It did not belong there. Too clean. Too expensive. The door opened and a man stepped out holding a black umbrella. He was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. His suit was tailored, his shoes polished, his watch worth more than everything on my table combined. But his face was wrong. Not ugly. Not sick. Wrong. His skin was pale in the way rich people become pale when they have not slept for many nights. His eyes were bloodshot and his lips looked dry despite the rain. More importantly, there were 3 thin black lines crossing his forehead. I looked once and felt my fingers tighten. Death lines. Not old ones either. Fresh. The kind that appear when a person has 3 days left, sometimes less. He sat down without asking. The stool creaked beneath him. I heard you can read things others can't, he said. His voice was calm, but his right hand trembled under the umbrella. Depends on what you want read, I said. He reached into his suit jacket and placed a folded piece of paper on the table. Then he placed a stack of cash beside it. The bills were damp. Not from rain. Rainwater runs clean. These bills smelled like soil. I did not touch them. I want you to read my wife's fortune, he said. I looked at the paper. Your wife didn't come with you? He swallowed. No. Then why isn't she here? He stared at the tabletop. She can't come. I almost laughed, but the smell coming from the cash stopped me. I unfolded the paper. It was a birth chart. Year, month, day, hour, written carefully in black ink. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. The woman had been born under a soft water sign, with steady fortune, a good marriage palace, and a long lifeline. Then I calculated the hidden branch. My fingers stopped. The rain suddenly sounded much louder. I checked again, then a third time. My grandfather used to say, if a calculation gives you an impossible answer, do not blame the stars. Blame the person sitting in front of you. I looked up at the man. Are you here to test me? His face changed. What? I tapped the paper. This woman is dead. He stopped breathing for a second. I continued. She died 21 days ago, violently. Head injury. There was blood on white clothing. Her body was buried before her resentment settled. The umbrella slipped from his hand and hit the ground. Rain struck his hair and shoulders, but he did not move. His mouth opened slightly. For a moment, he looked less like a rich businessman and more like a child caught stealing from an altar. "You," he whispered. "You really saw that?" I pushed the cash back toward him with 2 fingers. "I don't take money for reading the dead." He suddenly grabbed my wrist. His fingers were cold. "Please," he said. "Help me." I looked down at his hand. The black lines on his forehead seemed darker now. I should have told him to leave. That would have been the safe thing. But my grandfather also had another rule. If death follows a person because of their own greed, let them face it. If death follows a person because the dead are asking for justice, listen. So I pulled my wrist free and said, "Start from the beginning." The man's name was Daniel Zhang. He owned several restaurants, 2 hotels, and a development company that had recently started buying old houses near the river. His wife's name was Evelyn Liu. They had married less than 2 months earlier. "She was kind," Daniel said, staring at the wet pavement. "Too kind for me." I did not answer. People always say the dead were kind. No one ever says my wife was petty, my father was cruel, my brother was useless. Even if those things are true, the dead become saints very quickly. Daniel told me Evelyn had died in a road accident. A delivery truck turned too sharply near an intersection. She had been crossing the street. The truck driver claimed he did not see her. By the time witnesses pulled her out, half of her head had been crushed. He paused there. Rainwater dripped from his chin. "She was wearing a white dress," he said. I looked back at the birth chart. Blood on white clothing. "I arranged the funeral," Daniel continued. "Her family wanted a burial. They said cremation would make her soul restless." "Was the burial smooth?" His jaw tightened. "No. Of course not. Smooth burials do not send rich men to wet night markets with cash that smells like grave dirt." "What happened?" I asked. Daniel rubbed his palms together. "On the day we tried to move her coffin, 6 men couldn't lift it." I leaned back. "The coffin was too heavy?" "No, that's the strange part. It wasn't heavy when they first carried it into the funeral hall. But when it was time to take it to the cemetery, it wouldn't move. 6 men, then 8. They pushed, lifted, pulled, nothing. It was like the coffin had grown roots." "What did the funeral workers say?" Daniel looked away. "They said Evelyn did not want to leave." "And what did you do?" His silence answered before his mouth did. I sighed. "You forced it." His face went pale. "I didn't believe them. I thought they wanted more money. I was tired. Her relatives were crying. Everyone was watching me. I told them to use equipment." "You dragged her coffin out by force." His throat moved. "Yes." The rain fell harder. A scooter passed behind him, splashing water against the curb. Somewhere down the street, a vendor laughed too loudly, and the sound vanished as quickly as it came. "What happened after the burial?" I asked. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the empty bridge. The dreams started. Every night he dreamed of Evelyn standing outside their bedroom door. She wore the same white dress from the accident. In the dream, the left side of her face looked exactly as it had in life. The right side was gone. Not bloody, not broken, just missing, like someone had carved it out of the world. She never spoke. She only stood there, staring at him. On the first night, Daniel woke up screaming. On the second night, he slept with all the lights on. On the third night, he drank until he passed out on the sofa. He still dreamed of her, standing in the hallway, wet hair over one shoulder, white dress stained red, one eye fixed on him. "I hired spiritual masters," Daniel said quickly. 3 of them. They burned paper, chanted all night, put charms on every door. They said she had been sent away. Was she? He laughed once. It was not a sane laugh. For one night I didn't dream. I thought it was over. He stopped. His hands began trembling again. The next morning, I woke up because of the smell. "What smell?" "Rotten meat," he whispered. My fingers touched the brass compass without thinking. Daniel's voice dropped even lower. I opened my eyes, and she was lying next to me. The rain seemed to go quiet. Even the market behind us faded. I watched Daniel's face carefully. A liar usually adds details to make you believe him. A terrified man remembers only what he cannot forget. "She was on my bed," he said. "On her side, facing me. There was dirt on the sheets, under her nails, in her hair. Her burial clothes were torn. The side of her face they repaired at the funeral home was cracked." "Repaired?" He nodded. "They used plaster. Makeup. I paid extra so her mother could see her one last time without collapsing." A dead woman with half a real face and half a plaster face, lying beside her husband. That image would have sounded ridiculous if I had not seen worse. "What did you do?" I asked. "I ran." "Of course you did." He looked at me. I waved a hand. "Sorry." "Continue." "I didn't call the police. I couldn't. How could I explain that my dead wife crawled out of her grave and came home? My business would be ruined. Her family would go insane. So you left her there? I locked the bedroom door. I stared at him. He lowered his head. You locked your dead wife in your bedroom. I was scared. No, I said. You were stupid. There is a difference. For the first time, a little anger flashed in his eyes. Then it disappeared under fear. I know, he whispered. That's why I came. I looked at the black lines on his forehead again. They were not just death lines. Something thin and gray curled around them like smoke wrapped around string. A debt. Not financial. Karmic. I stood and began packing my things. Daniel looked up quickly. You'll help me? I'll look. Thank you. Thank you, Master Wu. Don't call me master, I said. And don't thank me yet. Depending on what your wife wants, I may only be there to watch you die properly. His face froze. I folded my black cloth. Get the car. Daniel lived outside the city, in one of those gated hillside neighborhoods where every house looked empty even when people lived inside. The roads were quiet, the trees trimmed too neatly, the security guards half asleep under warm lights. His villa sat at the end of a private lane, white walls, black roof, tall windows, too much glass, too little life. The moment I stepped out of the car, my compass needle spun once, then stopped, pointing toward the front door. Not north. The door. Daniel noticed. What is it? Who chose this house? I did. Of course you did. What does that mean? It means you have expensive taste and terrible instincts. His house faced a narrow road that ran straight toward the main entrance like a spear. Behind the property was a river bend. On both sides of the yard stood willow trees. Willows belong near graves, not bedrooms. Running water behind the house carried fortune away. A spear road in front drove killing energy through the door. Glass walls let the house leak warmth at night. This was not a home, it was a bowl. And something had been eating from it for a long time. Daniel unlocked the gate with shaking hands. As we walked through the yard, I saw dark soil scattered near the front steps. Not garden soil, grave soil. Wet, clumped, fresh. I crouched and touched it. Cold, very cold. Did you bring any of this back from the cemetery? I asked. No. Then she did. Daniel stopped walking. I looked up. You may want to stay behind me. He did. Very closely. Too closely. When we reached the front door, he hesitated. Master Wu, I told you not to call me that. Are we just going in? That is usually how doors work. I mean, he swallowed. Shouldn't you prepare something? A ritual? A sword? Holy water? I looked at him. Do I look like a priest? No. Then open the door. He entered the code. The lock beeped. The door clicked open. The smell hit first. Not strong. Not like a corpse left in summer. It was faint, hidden beneath air freshener and expensive wood polish. Rot. Damp soil. Burned paper. Daniel gagged and covered his nose. I stepped inside. The lights came on automatically. The entrance hall was wide, clean, and cold. Too cold. My breath did not fog, but the tips of my fingers went numb. There were talismans pasted everywhere, on the walls, on the staircase, on the windows, above the door. Most were printed yellow charms bought online. A few had been handwritten by someone who knew just enough to be dangerous. I walked to the nearest one and peeled it off. Daniel flinched. Should you do that? This charm is upside down. Is that bad? It's not great. I held it up. This isn't a protection charm. It's a sealing charm. He blinked. What does that mean? It means those spiritual masters you hired either had no idea what they were doing, I looked toward the staircase, or they were not trying to send your wife away. Daniel's face drained of color. What were they trying to do? Before I could answer, something upstairs moved. A slow dragging sound. Wood against wood. Daniel grabbed my sleeve. I looked at his hand. He let go. The dragging came again, from above, then stopped. The house became perfectly silent. I took 3 old coins from my pocket and placed them in my palm. They were from my grandfather's box, worn smooth from decades of readings. I tossed them once. All 3 landed heads up. I stared at them. Daniel whispered, What does that mean? It means your wife knows we're here. That's bad? No. I closed my hand around the coins. It means she has been waiting. We climbed the stairs slowly. Daniel stayed behind me, breathing too loudly. The second-floor hallway was dark, even though the lights were on. Shadows gathered in the corners like wet cloth. At the end of the hall was a closed bedroom door. A line of dried mud crossed the floor in front of it. The mud formed footprints, bare feet, small, a woman's. They led from the bedroom door to the staircase, then back again, over and over, as if Evelyn had walked out every night, reached the stairs, and returned to the room. I crouched. The footprints were not random. Each time they reached the staircase, the toes pointed outward, leaving. Each time they returned, the toes dragged, forced back. I looked at the talismans on the bedroom door, 3 sealing charms, 1 suppression charm, 1 silence charm. My stomach tightened. Daniel whispered, What is it? I stood. Your wife didn't come home to kill you. His eyes widened. Then why? I looked at the door. Someone brought her back. The bedroom handle turned by itself, slowly, once, twice, then stopped. Daniel made a small sound in his throat. From inside the room, a woman began to hum. The melody was soft, broken, almost familiar, a wedding song. I stepped closer. The air around the door was freezing. Evelyn Liu, I said, if you can hear me, I am not here to seal you. The humming stopped. Daniel whispered, don't talk to her. I ignored him. I am here to ask what you want. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then something slammed against the other side of the door so hard the frame cracked. Daniel screamed. The talismans fluttered. A voice came from inside. Not loud, not angry, a woman's voice, dry as paper. He lied. Daniel stumbled backward. I turned slowly toward him. His mouth opened. No, he said quickly. No, I didn't. I told you everything. The door slammed again. He lied. I stared at him. Daniel, I didn't lie. The third slam knocked one talisman loose. It drifted to the floor. The moment it landed, all the lights in the hallway went out. In the darkness, something cold touched the back of my neck. A hand, not Daniel's. Too small, too wet. Then, right beside my ear, Evelyn whispered, ask him about the driver. I turned my head slightly. Daniel was standing 3 steps behind me, frozen in the dark. Even without light, I could feel his fear change shape. Before, he had been afraid of Evelyn. Now he was afraid of me. What driver? I asked. Daniel did not answer. The bedroom door creaked open by itself. Just an inch. A thin smell of grave soil seeped through the crack. Daniel, I said again. What driver? He swallowed so loudly I heard it. The truck driver, he said. The one who hit Evelyn? Yes. You said he ran. He did. Did he? No answer. From inside the bedroom came a scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across wood. I took a step toward Daniel. You have 2 choices, I said. Tell me the truth while I am still asking politely, or let your wife tell me after she tears down that door. His eyes flicked to the bedroom. The scraping became louder. I didn't kill her, he said. That was not what I asked. He pressed both hands to his face. Rain hit the windows downstairs. The whole house seemed to breathe with it. I paid him, Daniel whispered. The scraping stopped. The hallway went silent. I felt Evelyn listening. I also felt the air get colder. Very bad sign. You paid the driver, I said slowly. Daniel shook his head quickly. No, not to kill her, I swear. I only wanted to scare her. That was one of the most useless sentences a guilty person could say. It ranks just below Mogil. I only pushed him a little, and I didn't think the knife was that sharp. Why? I asked. Daniel's voice cracked. Evelyn wanted to leave me. The bedroom door opened another inch. Daniel kept talking faster. She found out about the land deals, the old houses by the river. I bought them through shell companies. Some families didn't want to sell. I pressured them. She said she would expose me. So you arranged an accident? No, it was supposed to be a warning. The driver was supposed to speed close to her, frighten her. That's all. But he lost control. Inside the bedroom, the humming started again. This time, it was not a wedding song. It was lower. Angrier. I rubbed my temple. Let me guess, I said. After she died, you paid the driver to disappear. Daniel's lips trembled. I gave him money. And the spiritual masters? He looked down. I hired them through someone. They said Evelyn's spirit was too strong. They said if she kept appearing in my dreams, people would start asking questions. They promised to seal her. They brought her corpse back from the cemetery. I didn't know they would do that. But you let them. I was desperate. You were guilty. He said nothing. The black lines on his forehead had spread down toward his brows. The debt smoke around him thickened. I understood now. Evelyn had not crawled home by herself. Her corpse had been dug up and summoned back as part of a binding ritual. Those false masters had sealed her spirit into her own dead body, then locked her inside the bedroom to keep her from reaching Daniel in dreams. But dead hatred is patient. It waits in walls, in floorboards, in breath. It waits until a greedy man runs out of people to pay. What happened to the driver? I asked. Daniel looked up. I don't know. The bedroom door slammed open. A gust of air rolled through the hallway, carrying the smell of wet dirt and decay. Daniel screamed and fell backward. I turned. The room beyond the door was dark. At first, I saw only the bed, white sheets, brown soil, red stains. Then I saw her. Evelyn Liu stood at the foot of the bed. She wore a burial dress that had once been white. It hung from her body in torn strips, stiff with dirt. Her hair fell over one shoulder, wet and black. Her hands were gray, the nails packed with grave soil. Her face was exactly as Daniel described. The left half was beautiful, pale, still, almost human. The right half was a cracked plaster mask, white as bone, with lines running through it like broken porcelain. One real eye stared at Daniel. The painted eye on the plaster side stared at nothing. I had seen spirits before. I had seen corpses moved by resentment. But Evelyn was worse, because she was both. Her soul had not fully separated from the body. Her corpse held her like a cage. Every movement hurt her. Every breath she no longer needed was an insult. That kind of suffering does not make a ghost, it makes a knife. Daniel crawled backward. Evelyn, he sobbed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She tilted her head. The plaster side of her face cracked wider. Sorry? Her voice was soft. Then the hallway windows exploded inward. Glass scattered across the floor. Wind roared through the house. Talismans tore from the walls and flew in circles like frightened birds. Daniel covered his head. I stepped between them. Evelyn, I said sharply. Her eye moved to me. For 1 second, all the rage in the house pressed against my chest. It was heavy enough to stop my breathing. I know what he did, I said. But if you kill him like this, you will not be free. Her mouth twisted. Free? The word came out broken. I was buried, she whispered. He dragged me out. I was sleeping under cold soil. He dragged me out. They wrote nails into my bones. They burned my name backward. They tied my soul to meat. Her hands clenched. From inside her sleeves, black thread slipped out. Not thread. Hair. Long strands of black hair twisted with red string and yellow paper. Binding cords. The false masters had sewn the ritual into her burial clothes. I looked at Daniel. Did they leave anything here? What? The people you hired. Did they leave anything behind? An altar? A bowl? A mirror? A puppet? Anything? I don't know. I nearly slapped him. Instead, I looked around the room. There was a low table near the window. On it sat 3 black candles, a copper bowl filled with ash, a cracked hand mirror, and a small paper figure with Daniel's name written on its chest. Very interesting. And very stupid. Whoever performed the ritual had not finished cleaning up. That meant they expected to return. Or they expected Daniel to die before it mattered. I walked into the bedroom. Evelyn's head followed me. Daniel whispered, "Don't go near her." I ignored him. The floor was sticky under my shoes. Not blood. Corpse fluid mixed with grave mud. Lovely. I crouched by the altar and examined the paper figure. Daniel's birth date had been written incorrectly. Not by mistake. On purpose. They had not made a protection figure for him. They had made a replacement body. The ritual was not meant to keep Evelyn away from Daniel forever. It was meant to feed Daniel to Evelyn slowly. A sealed corpse spirit needs living energy to move. The false masters had tied Evelyn to Daniel's lifeline. Every night she walked, she drained him. 3 days left. That was what the death lines meant. I almost laughed. What is it? Daniel cried. I held up the paper figure. Congratulations. What? You were betrayed by your own frauds. He stared at me. They didn't save you. They sold you. Evelyn laughed. It was a small sound. Dry. Empty. But I heard grief inside it. Can you free her? Daniel asked. I looked at him. He did not ask, "Can you save me?" At least guilt had finally made him ask a useful question. Maybe, I said. What do you need? The driver. Daniel went still. What? Evelyn died with resentment because the person who hit her escaped punishment. Her body was disturbed because you wanted to hide the truth. Her soul was bound because those fake masters used your fear as payment. All 3 knots must be untied. I held up one finger. Truth. Second finger. Confession. Third. Restitution. Daniel stared blankly. I sighed. Call the police. Tell them everything. Give them the driver. I don't know where he is. Evelyn turned her head. Slowly. Her cracked face aimed at the closet. A dull thump came from inside. Daniel stopped breathing. I looked at him. You don't know where he is? His lips parted. Another thump from the closet. Then a man's muffled voice screamed through tape. My eyes narrowed. Daniel. He began to cry. I found him yesterday. Of course he did, because when rich men cannot solve a problem with money, they solve it with a locked room. Daniel had tracked down the driver after Evelyn returned. He thought handing the man over to her would appease her, but instead of calling the police, he kidnapped him, tied him up, and locked him in the closet of the same room where his dead wife was sealed. I walked to the closet and opened the door. A man fell out. He was bound at the wrists and ankles, mouth taped shut, eyes swollen from crying. He smelled of urine and terror. The driver was younger than I expected, maybe 26. His name tag from some delivery company still hung from his jacket, torn and dirty. I pulled the tape from his mouth. He gasped. Please, please don't let her take me. Evelyn made a sound. Not a growl. A sob. The driver scrambled backward until his bound shoulders hit the wall. I didn't mean to kill her, he cried. He paid me. He said, just scare her. He said no one would get hurt. Daniel covered his face. I looked at Evelyn. Her eye had changed. The rage was still there, but beneath it was something worse. Pain. The moment truth is spoken, the dead remember they were human, and sometimes that hurts more than hatred. I cut the driver's bonds with a small knife from my sleeve. Daniel looked shocked. You're letting him go? No, I said. I'm letting him talk. I tossed Daniel his phone. Call the police. He did not move. Evelyn did. One step, the entire house groaned. Daniel immediately grabbed the phone. His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped it twice. As he dialed, I turned to the driver. "You will confess," I said. He nodded frantically. "Yes, yes, I'll tell them everything." "And if you run?" He looked at Evelyn. "I won't." "Good." Daniel spoke into the phone with a broken voice. "My name is Daniel Zhang. I need to report a crime. My wife's death was not an accident." The words left his mouth. The temperature in the room rose by one breath, not warm, but less dead. Truth. First knot loosened, but the binding cords on Evelyn's sleeves still writhed. Confession was not enough. The ritual had to be broken before police arrived, or they would find a dead woman, a kidnapped driver, a room full of charms, and me standing there with a knife. That felt inconvenient. I picked up the cracked mirror from the altar. The back was covered in symbols written with black ink and blood. At the center was Evelyn's name, written backward. Around it were 4 nails tied with hair. Corpse binding method. Crude, but effective. I looked at Daniel. "Did they use anything from her body?" He looked sick. "I don't know." I held up the mirror. They needed hair, blood, nails, or bone. He turned toward the altar. There was a small box. "Where?" He pointed under the bed. "Of course, it is always under the bed." I crouched, lifted the hanging sheet, and looked underneath that. Something looked back. For half a second, I saw a child's face under the bed. Pale, smiling. Then it blinked sideways and vanished. I froze. That was not Evelyn. That was not part of this case. Something else had been drawn here by the ritual. I made a mental note to burn more things later. Then I reached under the bed and pulled out a red wooden box. Inside were strands of hair, 3 fingernails, a piece of blood-stained cloth, and a small tooth. Daniel turned away and vomited. I could not blame him. Actually, I could. I just chose not to. Time was limited. I placed the box on the floor. Then I took out my grandfather's red thread, 3 old coins, and a strip of blank yellow paper. I bit my thumb and wrote Evelyn's name correctly. Not backward. Not as a corpse, as a person. Evelyn Liu, born under the water moon, died with grievance, returned by force, seeking truth. The air trembled around the words. Evelyn stared at the paper, her cracked lips parted. For the first time, her expression shifted. Not anger, recognition. A dead person's name is an anchor. Write it wrong, and you can trap them. Write it right, and sometimes if heaven has not turned its face away, you can guide them home. I tied the paper to the red thread, looped the thread around the 3 coins, and placed them beside the red box. Then I lit one of the black candles. Daniel whispered, "Shouldn't candles be white?" "Yes." "Then why black?" "Because I am using their ritual backward." "That sounds dangerous." "It is." "Should I stand back?" "You should have stood back from your entire marriage, but here we are." Even Evelyn paused at that. The driver made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. I began chanting. Not loudly. Real rituals are not dramatic. The dead do not care if you sound impressive. They care if the door opens. As I chanted, the smoke from the black candle twisted downward instead of up. It flowed across the floor like ink wrapped around the red box, then climbed Evelyn's burial dress. The black hair threads on her sleeves writhed violently. Evelyn arched backward. The plaster side of her face cracked open. Daniel screamed. The driver tried to crawl away. I slapped 1 coin onto the floor. "Stay." The room shook. The first binding cord snapped. Evelyn fell to one knee. A sound came from her throat, half pain, half relief. I continued chanting. The candle flame turned blue. The red thread tightened around the coins until it cut into my fingers. Blood ran down my hand. Good. Blood makes bargains clear. The second cord snapped. Every window in the room shattered outward. This time, glass flew away from us, into the night, as if the house itself had exhaled. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Police. We had minutes, maybe less. The third cord would not snap. It was thicker than the others, tied not to Evelyn's body, but to Daniel's shadow. I looked down. His shadow stretched across the floor toward her, not away from the candle, toward her. Something had bitten into it. The ritual had already fed on him too long. To free Evelyn completely, someone had to return what was taken. I looked at Daniel. He understood before I spoke. His face collapsed. "No," he whispered. I stood. "You owe her life. I can go to prison. That is law, not balance. I'll give her family everything. That is money, not balance. What do you want from me?" 3 years. He stared. "What? 3 years of your life. Return to her spirit so she can separate from the corpse and leave cleanly." His lips trembled. "Will I die? Not tonight. How much time do I have? After this, I don't know." "That's not fair." Evelyn slowly lifted her head, her one eye fixed on him. Daniel saw her, really saw her. Not as the thing in his bed, not as the nightmare, as the woman he had loved badly, feared deeply, and betrayed completely. His shoulders sagged. "No," he whispered. "It isn't fair." For a moment I thought he meant himself. Then he looked at Evelyn. "What I did to you," he said, "it wasn't fair." The third cord pulsed. I held out the knife. Cut your palm. Daniel took it with shaking fingers. He sliced his palm open and hissed. Blood welled up. Press it to the floor, I said. He obeyed. I took Evelyn's name paper, placed it between his bleeding palm and his shadow, then wrapped the red thread around his wrist. Repeat after me, I said. His voice was barely sound. I, Daniel Zhang, return what I stole. The house groaned. He repeated it. I return breath to breath, he repeated. I return years to the road I broke, he repeated. I confess the debt, he repeated. I accept the cost. He hesitated. Evelyn watched him. Sirens grew louder. I said, Daniel. He closed his eyes. I accept the cost. The third cord snapped. Daniel screamed. Not from his throat, from somewhere deeper. His shadow tore loose from Evelyn's feet like wet cloth being ripped from a wound. The red thread burned bright in my hands. The coins spun on the floor, faster and faster, until they blurred into 3 circles of bronze light. Evelyn's corpse collapsed, but her spirit remained standing. For one brief moment, she looked whole. No plaster, no blood, no torn burial dress, just a young woman in a white dress, tired beyond words, looking at the man who had ruined her life and the death after it. Daniel sobbed on the floor. I'm sorry. Evelyn looked at him for a long time. Then she said, I know. He looked up, hope breaking across his face, but she continued, I just don't care anymore. Then she turned to me. Thank you. I nodded. Go before the road closes. She looked toward the window. Beyond the broken glass, the rain had stopped. For the first time that night, moonlight entered the room. Evelyn walked toward it. With each step, the mud on the floor dried. The smell of rot faded. The black candle burned white. At the window, she paused. Without turning around, she said there was another one. My skin tightened. Another what? Another woman. Daniel froze. Evelyn's voice became faint. Before me. Then she disappeared. The candle went out. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then the police broke through the front door downstairs. Chaos followed, as it usually does when the living arrive late to a problem the dead already solved. Daniel confessed. The driver confessed. The police found the altar, the bindings, the evidence of kidnapping, and eventually enough financial records to bury Daniel's companies deeper than Evelyn had ever been buried. They also found the false spiritual masters. Well, 2 of them. The third was missing. His apartment had been emptied overnight. The only thing left behind was a bowl of ash and a strip of yellow paper pasted to the inside of his door. I saw a photo of it later. The paper held 4 words. The debt continues. Daniel did not die in 3 days. He survived, but his hair turned white before trial. Not gray. White. All of it. The doctors called it stress. Doctors have simple words for things they do not want to understand. As for Evelyn, her family reburied her properly. This time, her coffin was light. 4 people carried it without trouble. Her mother cried until she fainted. Her father bowed to me 3 times. I did not take money from them. Some rules matter. A week later, I returned to my stall near the old bridge. The night market was loud again. Grilled meat smoked under red lanterns. Teenagers took selfies by the river. A drunk man asked if I could predict lottery numbers. I told him yes. Then gave him 6 numbers that were all impossible. Business was normal. Almost. Just before midnight, when I was packing up, my brass compass turned by itself. The needle pointed toward the bridge. A woman stood there under the streetlight. She wore a white dress. For a second, I thought it was Evelyn, but this woman was older. Her hair was tied with a red ribbon. Her feet did not touch the ground. In her arms, she held a black wooden box. She looked at me from across the road. Then she smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, knowingly. I heard Evelyn's final words again. There was another one. The woman under the bridge lifted one pale hand and pointed behind me. I turned. On my table, where there had been nothing a moment before, lay a folded birth chart. The paper was damp, not with rain, with river water. I unfolded it slowly. The name at the top had been scratched out, but the date of death was still readable. 7 years ago. The same night Daniel bought his first riverside property. I looked back toward the bridge. The woman was gone. Only the black wooden box remained, sitting beneath the streetlight. My grandfather's voice whispered in my memory. If death follows a person because the dead are asking for justice, listen. I sighed, picked up my compass, and walked toward the bridge. Because in my line of work, the dead rarely come back for no reason, and they almost never come alone. Ketu.